So the best stories you find are the ones that find you. I'm a creative writer, and a few years ago, me and a close friend, who's also a writer, we were sat in his living room just chatting about ideas, chatting about pieces we were working on. And the main difference we discovered between us was that I'm quite confident as a writer. I submit stuff to competitions, I try and enter journals, I go to events, but he was really shy as a writer. He was very introverted, and I thought it was a shame that he wasn't submitting his stuff anywhere because of that reason alone, because his material was really great, and I'm quite passionate about having really quality writing shared and resonating with people that should be reading it. So we were like, how can we come up with a way to get your work out there anonymously so no one will know it was you who wrote it, but then you'll get feedback on it and it'll improve you and make you more confident. So we thought about just doing a blog and making it anonymous, but we wanted to do something quite innovative. So we came up with the concept of found fiction. And it was quite simple, and some of you might have found these, by the way, I left a few around earlier, where we just printed this guy's stories out at work, after work, like without anyone knowing, bought the cheapest envelopes we could find, branded them up FF for found fiction, and instead of his name at the bottom, we put hashtag found fiction. And the idea was that we just leave them around in public, these envelopes, and it says read me on the back. And then people would find it, they would read it, and then they would tweet or Instagram or Facebook, hashtag found fiction, your writing is great and you should do more of it. So we left these envelopes around just any public spaces, really, around York, where I lived at the time mainly, and around Leeds. We printed around 30 of them all together, kind of branded them up. That is a potato stamp, which is not something I'd done since I was at primary school before. And we left them in parks, we left them on trains, that's in an art gallery, just anywhere we felt they were likely to be found and appreciated, these envelopes with short stories inside written by this guy. So that's, in a book was a good idea, because you know that someone buying a book or interested in buying a book might like to read one of this guy's stories. On public transport, obviously people with nothing better to do when they're on a bus or a train might like stumbling upon one of his stories, and then just at a bar as well. And we kind of waited for many weeks and many months before anything happened, and we were thinking to ourselves, well, it's just something else that hasn't worked out. And I'm someone who's a bit of a doer, so I get an idea and I like to do it. He's a bit of a dreamer. And I was just thinking, is this just another thing that's just made me a busy fool and just kind of taken up a lot of my time and ended up not achieving anything? So we waited for many, many months. It was about 4 months or something before we got our first tweet. So this is a few years ago now, and it was found, as you can see, in Leeds Art Gallery, one of this guy's stories, super short. And this girl really liked the story. They liked this guy's style of writing. They wrote in, they posted a tweet, they said they loved the project and the concept. And we thought it was the best thing ever, really, because it works. What we'd kind of been working towards had paid off. And the mechanism had we'd achieved that. So we just kind of redoubled our efforts, and we did way more printing, way more packaging of these stories, leaving them in increasingly kind of out there places, not necessarily places that might be found immediately. That's in a Cath Kidston store, I think that's in York, in the crevices of trees, at cash points. We gave them to friends and family up and down the country, friends and family who were going on holiday, so trying to spread these stories far and wide. That's at William Blake's grave in London, which is pretty cool, and then on pianos and just out and about anywhere, really. And sure enough, more of them got found, more of them got shared, and they kind of touched more people and resonated with more people. People saying that they liked the project, they liked the idea of it. People started writing in with really lovely messages about how they'd come to stumble upon the story. So I'll just read the top one out because it's the best email I've ever received. So I went on a date last night. He stood me up in the end, but while I was waiting, I picked up a magazine at the bar, found an envelope. I spent the rest of the evening in a bubble of glee, reading and writing fiction. I would love to join you. So there, because that person stumbled upon one of our stories, just by chance, and what could have been a proper miserable night for her being stood up for a day turned into an inspiring one, and we got all sorts of messages like that. People at spoken word nights who weren't expecting to perform found an envelope with a story and got up on stage and read it out for the first time ever. And people writing in wanting to actually take part and distribute for us. So we started to create this network of distributors up and down the country. And then it started just scaling up massively, and we were printing hundreds of stories, all for free at this point. It was just exciting that we were having impact and people were sharing and exactly what we wanted to happen. And by then it had kind of gone way, way beyond just this guy's stories. He was still writing stories more confidently than ever. But we kind of got emails in from people saying, oh, can I write for you? Can I distribute for you? Will you print my story out? And we kind of had a bit of quality control about it, but we generally printed everything we received. And maybe as a result of the people on holiday, we were giving bundles of envelopes to share wherever they were going. We started to get people posting from across the world, across the English-speaking world mainly, so places like Sydney, Australia, San Francisco, Washington in the States, people who kind of had found out about the project just by looking at Twitter, or they'd read an article about it, or someone had told them about it, or they'd found a story themselves and they became a distributor or writer themselves. This, about a year after that, so that's about 12 months from start to finish there, we got an email from someone in Poland who essentially was a Polish writer and wanted to write in Polish, and they were like, will that be possible? I know you write in English. And we were like, well, yeah, why not? Let's just do it in 2 languages. You spread the word in Poland, we'll continue doing it in the English-speaking world. And so now that person kind of created a network of distributors and writers out in Poland just doing Polish versions of the stories. So this is a few snaps from someone who distributes for us in Poland, in Katowice in Poland. And then that created, again, just us diversifying into different languages in different parts of the world. So we've had some stories translated into French. We've got a few distributors out there. And we're hoping that people, that's a relatively recent thing, we're hoping that people will find them and want to write kind of French language stories and distribute them. And I'm from like a marketing background, so I understand that to kind of get anywhere and to really get the word out, you need to have a bit of a strategy around how you're going to promote the project. So I've kind of spent quite a bit of time just approaching newspapers, blogs, doing events and things, just to get the word out there and to just kind of share what's happened, and if people want to get involved, they're welcome. And that's kind of really helped boost our numbers in terms of how many people we have writing and distributing for us now, and the scale we're now operating at. And that was in the Eye paper, which was a massive deal for us. And the next day we had like hundreds of emails of people wanting to distribute our stories. And these are our corporate sponsors now. So not really. We don't have these corporate sponsors. Although it would be great to work with those guys, I'm sure, yeah. But it does bring me on to how we sustain ourselves now. And about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we got our first bit of public funding. So Leeds Inspired, as a few of you might have heard, funds so many kind of creative projects in the city and beyond. So they kind of gave us a pot of money, just a few £100 really, to launch Found Fiction, which felt strange because it had been going a few years, but we wanted to kind of launch it and reach out to more people and really kind of seize the momentum that we've been slowly building over the past few years. So we kind of put on an event where we had speakers, we had a writing desk that we toured the city to kind of drum up a bit of publicity for the event. And we had some live artists on stage who was kind of writing a visual interpretation of spoken word performances as they were being performed, which was pretty cool. It was a really good night. And this is an old slide, actually. We're at about 6,000 stories written. It's still in 3 languages. We've got around the same number of writers and people distributing now. So that's kind of what takes us from that conversation in me and the other writers' living room to near enough the present day. And we've kind of diversified beyond just these envelopes now. We do writing workshops for kids particularly, because literacy is a challenge. I mean, even me as a writer and someone who's always been a passionate reader, it can be boring to be in English lessons, and literature can be presented as a boring thing. Vocab, handwriting, all sorts like that. So hiding and finding the stories is quite exciting for kids, and capturing their attention around short stories is something that we've done, and we've done in schools. That's at the Hunslet Club, and we actually get them creating the stories themselves and printing them, folding them up, putting them around their community. Workshops as well with adults. So the project now has kind of grown beyond just the stories, and it's more about the fact that we're kind of trying to empower people with a vision to see stories everywhere, not just in the physical sense with the envelopes, but in terms of like finding inspiration everywhere. Because as artists, I'm sure you'd appreciate that is a skill, and it's a gift really to be able to be inspired wherever you are, because you can transcend any surroundings, which can really help you in your life. We also do creative installations, so this kind of transfers over to art really. This writing desk is something where we co-create stories within a community. So that could be, as here in Leeds, basically literally just lifting this desk around town, putting a few instructions on it to co-create a story line by line, and just seeing what happens, coming back to it a few hours later and finding that about 30 people, 30 different types of handwriting have added to a story. And then that's quite a special thing in itself, and we've kind of used that at events and hired this desk out effectively to achieve that aim. We've had structures built around. This one is our tall tales tree, so people kind of essentially write their ideas for stories, poems and songs onto a paper leaf, hang it from the tree, and then it's a very nice visual thing. Again, we kind of recoup the costs that it took to build this thing by hiring it out, and festivals have kind of bought it from us because it's a good way of capturing data as well. We had it at an event in Manchester where the theme of it was Liverpool, and people wrote on the leaves what their favourite thing about Liverpool was. So some people wrote places, some people wrote people, some people wrote parts of town, and afterwards we looked at the leaves and thought, well, kind of what's the data behind this? And we found that 50% of people think the best thing about the city is a particular place, and it's quite a good bit of data for people as well. This has just been approved. We're going to be working with Leeds Bid around Christmas time to install art gallery descriptions on real places in the city centre, again implying that art is everywhere, not just in art galleries, like stories are everywhere, not just in libraries and bookshops. It's proper art, it's real life art, so that's something that's going to be taking place in December. We also have done adventures like story hunts, where we've had these boxes made and we've kind of cut up a short story into many extracts, hidden them around town. At the bottom of the story is a clue to where the next extract is, and that's quite an entertaining thing for families. It's also been of interest to writers, to professional creative writers who sell books, because it can tie in quite well with book launches as a kind of interesting way to promote a book. A lot of authors do their own publicity, so that's something we've been able to support them for and charge for. We've worked with the Bradford Science Museum to stage bedtime stories, which is a huge event that takes place twice a year at the Science Museum, kind of inspiring families to read and write together with kind of a extravaganza of activities, working with schools to create zines, just kind of making it clear that everything we do is bespoke, and sort of like working with clients to identify what events they have coming up, what we can support them with to capture their audience's imaginations. Choose Your Adventure, you might have heard of Bandersnatch, the Netflix thing. Choose Your Adventure is big again, so we've kind of done cross-city Choose Your Adventure, where it's basically done on text message, where you're posing people alternate outcomes and sending them around the city to pick up little clues here and there to build a story that they're controlling. And then finally, writings on the wall, so just a very simple idea, just completing a sentence in different ways and just leaving it somewhere, and that's tied in with a lot of cool events that people have done in York and Leeds and across the north. So we get kind of funding, and we get our funding mainly on a project by project basis. So all these events that you've seen here have been hired out by schools, by festivals, as we'll come on to here, by libraries. And we kind of just cost up, as Bobby said, the price of the materials, the cost of our time, and then some. And obviously, I kind of am pragmatic about it, because I have done work for free for two reasons. One, when we were just starting out and we needed case studies, like the equivalent of building a portfolio. And then secondly, I always look at the client, really, and if it's kind of a potential grower, because if I was to kind of refuse to do an event with a client just because I wasn't getting paid for it, I might well have lost a relationship there that could eventually have led to more work. So it's not really a race to the bottom in terms of driving your costs down, but equally it's not about denying yourself opportunities as well. I'm partnering up with Leeds Lit Fest, which is in its infancy, to stage further events and to really unite Leeds and all its many communities who have their own kind of reading and writing literacy events going on, just uniting it all together around celebrating literature. And that's a WhatsApp version of the Choose Your Adventure story on the left there. So in 6 years, which is unbelievable now, in 6 years we've kind of gone from doing it about this guy's stories to now it being more about giving people that vision, as I said before, to find stories and inspiration everywhere. Because as a writer, and I never really appreciated this until quite recently, and as artists, I'm sure you're the same, but the power to kind of find inspiration anywhere is a gift, and to give someone else that gift and to kind of try and bring that out of them really does help you in all sorts of ways in your life. So this is our mission statement now, to empower people with an artistic vision that helps them find stories and inspiration everywhere. We achieve this by working closely with partners to bring guerrilla publishing, creative engagement and storytelling workshops to the world. And these are some of our partners now, and they're all charged at different rates, and some of them are based on like money per hour, funds per hour. Some of them have got like limited funds but quite a lot of money. Others have just a pot of money for one project, so we kind of work backwards from the budget. And as I said earlier, if one of them didn't happen to have budget for something and approached us for an idea, we generally support them anyway because the relationship is valuable. And it's only recently that we've acquired these clients, and it's all happened quite quickly, working with universities, working with national museums and libraries and big festivals in big cities. So doing this project myself and growing it from what you've seen to what you see now, so I've realised two things. So belief of my belief in terms of believing this can have impacts and it can grow. And riding through the peaks and the troughs, and there are like massive peaks and troughs. Today, I've done a workshop that no one came to, for example, and now I'm doing talk and there's lots of you here. And I realised that that's kind of just the nature of it. You can't control how many people turn up, and that's no way of validating anything anyway, really. Everything's heading in a good direction, and it's belief that it will continue to do so. And it's also belief of everyone who's distributed for us, every one of our writers, every one of the volunteers that we've had at our events who believe in this idea that we've got. And that's special, that takes belief on their part. And the second thing I've realised from doing this project is that stories rock. Thank you very much.